smaller street, and it was interesting because I was living there for like a year and a half or something, and one day I was flipping through Rock Sound. It's like a British magazine,
Yeah.
and I had this old Cadillac. I had like a '70 Coupe de Ville, and there's a picture of the fucking Foo Fighters. I kid you not, sitting on my car. I was like,
What?
dude, that's my car because I had the Sacred Heart painted on the side, and it turned out their studio was at the dead end of the street because it runs into a dead end. So that's where and we mixed drums there a while, like years later. But they came out to like do a photo shoot, and they said, "Hey, let's go take a picture by this car." And it was my car. It was funny because that was always my thing about living in the valley is I was like right up the street from the Foo Fighters rehearsal space and studio and shit.
Dude, did you save the picture at least?
No, well, dude, okay, so I saved the magazine with the picture in it, but I'm talking, this is 2004, 2005. I was
Yeah.
like 19 or 20 or something like it. And I just lost it along the way. I've moved so much and we travel a lot. I lost it, unfortunately. So sadly, I don't have it, but I have it in my memory, which I guess is okay.
Which is honestly more important nowadays, especially with the way things are. You know what I mean? Like things are so fickle now that having those memories, in my opinion, are incredibly valuable, dude. And that's the funny thing about living in the valley that I try and tell people because there's so many musicians kind of moving out to the area now that
Yeah.
the valley has so many little hidden spots. LA
Oh,
in
totally.
general. Yeah, but like there's like you'll live somewhere and then you'll find out like a year later that like Foo Fighters practices down the street or this other
Dude,
artist writes down the street. It's like fucking crazy, dude. That it's
it
full of it.
really is, man. In LA, because it's so sprawling, everybody looks at it as Hollywood, movies, entertainment industry. I've lived all over. I used to live in Glassell. I grew up in Glassell Park by Dodger Stadium, and it's one of the oldest neighborhoods in LA. And people don't understand that there's actually real history to LA besides Hollywood Boulevard and Sunset and Venice Beach. There's like a lot of cool nooks. And I agree. The Valley, especially Sherman Oaks, I love Sherman Oaks.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there that people don't know about. I mean, I think people, like you said, are kind of getting hip to it because I agree. A lot of the bands I know have moved to the Valley from LA because
Yeah.
they have kids or they want a different way of life. I love it out there, but
You know what's an
I
area that's starting to see some traction right now? Like very small, but Santa Clarita, believe it or not.
oh yeah, dude, I'm
Yeah.
not surprised at all. As they price everybody out, you got to think, dude, like housing gets so expensive in city proper that people move a little further away and a little further away. Eventually, Santa Clarita is going to be really popular. They're going to price everybody else out, and everybody's going to move to fucking Palmdale.
I
And then
know. I
eventually,
know.
eventually, everybody's going to fucking leave California because they can't afford it.
It's just that pattern of constantly pushing people a little bit farther until another area springs up and then becomes that. It's funny
Exactly.
because I have a couple buddies of mine who they tour professionally and they do the whole thing, right? And they lived in LA, they did the whole thing, and they all just kind of collectively moved to Santa Clarita and they love it because it's out of the way. And most rehearsals now, like you were saying, they're in the valley. Like most rehearsals are in the
Yep.
valley. So they can just go there and if they ever need to fly out for the tour, they'll drive or Uber to LAX, but they don't live anywhere near that area. So it's just interesting what's happening right now in LA, man. It's like a huge melting pot. Obviously, Culver City, downtown, those areas are still popping. They're not dead whatsoever. They're still alive. But it's interesting to see what most people would have considered the outskirts like 10, 15 years ago are
Oh
starting
yeah.
to become their own little hubs now. And it's fascinating to me, man.
Oh, dude, that's all. Like Riverside, that's all it was farmland. And then
Yeah.
people started moving there, and now Riverside's like its own world. And dude, I'll tell you something. Like when I was growing up, like where I grew up, Glassell Park was the hood. I mean, it was ghetto as fuck. And same with like Silver Lake and Atwater, those areas. And then downtown was like a no go zone. If you
Yeah.
were if you weren't banging or if you weren't selling drugs, like you'd get yourself in. Now it's a bunch of lofts with a bunch of fucking hipsters paying like $3,000 for a little unit in there. So, and same with Glassell Park, dude. I went back. I'd go back there once in a while because my grandma lived there, but she passed. So I stopped going. But when I grew up there, it was a real bad area, heavily, tons of drugs, tons of gangs. Now it's a bunch of little white hipster dudes with flannels and cowboy hats. And I'm like, dude, this is sad. I prefer the gangbangers over the hipsters personally, but
Dude,
um,
you know what's funny is I'm born and raised in LA, so I was born and raised in South Central, right off of
okay,
Central Avenue and all that. And so
yeah,
I moved to the Valley for school, and I've been out here for 10 years. It's always interesting meeting another individual who lived a long time in LA, because most musicians nowadays are fairly new. Like they haven't
Oh
lived
yeah.
here for more than 5 or 10 years, right? And it's hard for them to grasp that all those trendy areas were not like that 10 years ago. Like in high
Fuck
school,
no.
nobody went to all those areas. Like you stayed
No.
away from those
Yeah, you
areas,
get in
dude.
a lot of trouble unless you were looking for trouble. And dude, the thing is, these guys about North Hollywood's another area. When I was growing up, North Hollywood boys, the gangs there, North Hollywood was fucking rough.
Yeah.
Now it's a bunch of lofts. I remember we would rehearse in North Hollywood because it was cheap. This is back when I was a teenager. There was a lockout there, and you could pay like $12 an hour to rehearse. And we would go there because it was cheap, even though it sucked. And now that same rehearsal space is still open. You got to be a signed band to go rehearse there.
Oh
Forget
yeah,
it. It's $120 an hour because
easily.
North Hollywood's nice now. So it's like I don't like it. And it's funny growing up there because everybody always asks, "Oh, where are you from?" And you're like, "I'm from LA." No, but where are you from originally? I'm like, no, no, no. Like I'm
LA.
from LA. And that's so there's so many transplants that I think they outnumber us or
They
locals.
do. They do, man.
So
It's strange, isn't it? It's strange how it's bizarre to meet another born and raised LA local. Like maybe not so much in the band scene as much as other areas, because there are plenty of like bands that have come out of LA, but I find it as the older I get, it's just more rare when I meet another like musician band who's like, yeah, I was born here, I grew up in East Los Angeles. It's like, whoa, you're like the first guy I've met in the past year who's
I
from
know, I
here.
know. It's not common, bro.
It's
Well, dude,
not.
a lot of people from LA are moving too because they got priced out. So like I knew a lot of dudes that lived in that area, North Hollywood, or even up towards like Panorama City, those areas. They all moved to like Arizona and
Mm-hmm.
Texas because they couldn't afford where they were from anymore, which is really actually, it's kind of fucked up. So all these guys get pushed out because, developers price them out. They've got to go so someone else from another place can move there who has the money to live there. Most of my friends, honestly, that I grew up with from LA, for the most part, have left because they're like, dude, I'm not going to spend $1 million on a 2 bedroom house, or they don't have the money to spend $1 million on a 2 bedroom house, um, in North Hollywood or one of these areas. So they book it. And so now all the people from LA are leaving. So all to make room for all these other fuckheads to move in. And that was kind of where I was at. I was living in Huntington Beach, and we still have a spot down there. But I was like, it got to the point, the state income taxes, everything that
Yeah,
California is, it becomes unmanageable. It's like, dude, you can't even I don't care how much money you make. It becomes unreasonable, to live there.
it does.
Uh, Unless you want to rent an apartment, never own a house, and work fucking 80 hours a week to live there, go ahead. But
Which
I
is
was like,
kind of the vibe, to be honest with you. It's the vibe that's kind of come out of nowhere, not out of nowhere, but here's what I observed, which I'm curious to see what you think. So lately, over the past decade, there's been a lot of artists in particular that have moved here from the East Coast, all over the place, always, but primarily from the East Coast, because the East Coast has gotten very, very expensive, more than like the national average housing
oh, dude,
price,
it's
right?
horrible.
Oh, of course. And so what ended up happening was all these musicians, let's just use musicians as an example, artists in general, but musicians specifically, moved from like New York and other areas that got so expensive that they realized that LA was essentially a tiny bit cheaper, not by much, but they could get their own place, their own apartment, they could live by the beach. And to them,
Yeah.
that was like a step up, which it truly is. And therefore, that trend kind of started seeing this house pricing rise that we've seen over the past decade. And it's why LA has gotten so cluttered in the past
You'll do
decade.
that. There's more demand than supply. And anytime you see that, no matter how many people live, more people want to go there. It's going to keep driving, that force behind it. And like you said, LA is expensive as fuck, but it is cheaper than somewhere else.
Yep.
It's same with like, every burgeoning community is like that. People move there, they price the locals out, so the locals leave. Nashville's the same way. Nashville's like blowing up.
Yeah.
So a while ago, you could get a house here for 200 grand. Now it's 400 grand. And so the kids growing up here are like, dude, I can't afford to fucking live here anymore because these cocksuckers with money moved from somewhere else. And it's just this weird ebb and flow thing where people price the locals out, the locals leave, and they price those locals out because it's too expensive. It's weird, dude. The whole phenomenon is kind of strange, but
It
you
really
know,
is strange. But what I'm curious about, by the way, I'm gonna normally I would do like a very, very formal intro, but I love the way we started this conversation. I love that we just went right into it because I love getting to know the people that I'm talking to, and I love it because you're probably like my third LA local that I've ever talked to, and it's fascinating to me to see. Well, it doesn't happen often, but it's interesting because all of our point of views, for the most part, are somewhat similar. Be it that sometimes the way we see it is a little bit different, but our feelings towards it are fairly the same. Do you feel like it is in some sort of way a good thing though? Because in LA, it is getting cluttered, but because of that, there are all these bunch of other little communities that are popping up, like in Arizona. There's like this scene that's starting to come out of nowhere. And in Texas too, there's a lot of like little movement that's happening
Yeah.
because of that constant moving that's being caused by, LA and other cities being too expensive to live in. People are starting to kind of take that creativity other places. I
No,
mean,
it really, dude. A lot of these boom towns, like Austin, Texas, or Nashville, or something, they have. It definitely spurs creativity in those cities. So Nashville used to be just a country town. This was like
yeah,
where country. It's music city, the music capital, but that was only pertaining to country. But now you see a lot of hip hop artists coming out of Nashville. You see a lot of rock bands coming out of Nashville. And I don't think that would have taken place unless it was for that flight from these other places. And they took a little bit of that flavor with them to these other cities. And, those cities change over time and it's going to keep happening. The only part with California that actually bothers me is I think it creates a huge divide between the upper and lower classes
yeah,
because typically the people you're going to drive out are middle class. They can't afford to live there and they don't want to live in the ghetto. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to leave. So what you create is this huge disparity between the rich and the poor. You have the elitist class and the servant class.
yeah,
So you have all these rich people and the people who work for them. And you don't have anybody in the middle. And that is the economically speaking and socially economically speaking, I don't think it's good for the city of LA because as more and more of those people leave because they're not in one spectrum or the other, you're going to end up with like almost a dystopian society where there's gated communities with all these fucking rich people in them. And then you right outside those gates is all the people who serve them. And I think it's unhealthy culturally.
well, of
And
course,
and it's slow, but it's going to continue over time where the middle class and the majority of let's say call them regular people. I'm not saying the other people aren't regular, but you know what I mean? Just kind of average,
yeah.
your average Joe is going to take off. And so I think it creates something that isn't healthy for society and stuff because it becomes less of a melting pot because there's a big divide between the social classes and there's no one to bridge that gap anymore. It's already happening. It's going to keep happening. And over time, you're going to see that disparity more and more because obviously LA, especially, is a city of immigrants.
Yeah.
Everybody from there, my grandparents came from fucking Ireland, or my great grandparents actually. And then you have tons of people from South America, from Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
from Eastern Europe, and what happens is those people aren't going to come there anymore, and LA is going to lose what it had all along, which is what made LA special, dude. LA was a middle class city in the 80s. You
Yeah.
get a house you could be a plumber and own a house.
Yeah.
Now you got to fucking own a company to own a house. So it's like I feel bad because this burden is placed on other people, and it forces normal people to leave, and LA loses its charm, which is the fact that you can go there and experience the whole world in 30 square miles, and that's going to cease to exist. So that's my 2 cents on like why I don't like it, but it's also made LA super special because you can meet someone from literally anywhere in the world within in a single restaurant, and I love that
Exactly.
but I do unfortunately think that will die out as time goes by as the majority of, just like I said, regular kind of people take off.
You know what's interesting about that is that you are right that it's already happening, and I do feel like most people believe that it is happening. I've actually seen it firsthand because I grew up in South Central, right? And my parents, they still live there. They have their home and they love it. It's a nice little quaint home. But it's essentially the ghetto. It's not as
Right.
bad as it used to be, but there's
No.
still some bad areas. And I don't know who is they, but I know that there's been financial groups that have tried to buy my parents' home like 3
Of
times
course.
last year, and then they're not the
Yeah.
only ones. Like there's all these neighborhoods that for so many years were considered lower class, like the ghetto. But when you look at it from a what is it, geography or whatever. When you look at the map,
Geographical.
geographical, yes, they live fairly close to the airport. They live fairly close to the beach, and there's all these people that are coming in, buying all these houses massively, and they're
Yep.
just going to turn them around, and basically people are going to start paying massive amount of rent to live in these areas. And the thing that happens that people don't realize, like in Echo Park or Silver Lake, is that they do buy these homes and they push people out. But what ends up happening is, for the most part, they don't even fix them up. They don't even really fix up the area. They just kind of buy it, maybe paint it, and then you're basically just moving into a really old house that someone just charged you 3 times more for. And it creates that whole thing that we talked about, the whole gentrification, pushing people out. And so it's fascinating to see that happening right now. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, is that something you can even stop? Like, is that something that is just inevitable?
Because the people with the money, man, always goes back to the people with the money. These guys, it's not like one single person is going in there and trying to buy property. You have massive corporate takeovers of land. So North Hollywood's a really good example. That was really rough. So even now, there's a section of North Hollywood that's still really, really bad, right?
Yeah.
But it bumps right up against a wealthy area. And I'm not saying there's not even a line or a street. There'll be a nice house, and right next to it,
just go past Lancashire for like 1 or 2 streets, and you'll see
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So what they're doing is, as every tenant that moves out, they take over the apartment unit. Another tenant moves out. Pretty soon they have every unit. They buy the building because there's no more rent control. They tear the fucking building down. They put something else there, a big building of lots. So in 10 years, even those Lancashire areas in North Hollywood that right now are bad, quote unquote bad neighborhoods, whatever you want to call it, are eventually going to be that same machine. That machine doesn't stop because there's too much money behind it, and there's too little protection for regular people in that same demographic that are getting pushed out. My grandparents, I remember they moved down to Palm Springs area when they got old,
Yeah.
like a lot. And I was talking to my grandpa, he's like, yeah, there's drive-bys here in Cathedral City, which is right next to it. What happens is all the gangbangers, all these people who lived in a neighborhood are pushed out. So they're going to go somewhere where they can afford to live and do the same exact thing. So like these old retirement communities were having like drive-bys and shit and dope dealing because they all came from areas like North Hollywood and stuff like that. So they don't try, like you said, they don't try and fix these issues, these social issues. They just push them away. They sweep them under the rug and let someone else deal with them. And that is the biggest problem, is they don't embrace the community they're taking over. Don't try and help the people from the community. They just try and kick them to the door so they can let someone with more money move in. And that is the real problem. They don't try and better people's lives. They don't give a shit about anybody but money, the almighty dollar. So there's a lot of victims involved that no one hears about. And it's those people from those communities that built those communities that are now out. They don't try and help them. They don't try and help them. They're not gaining anything through this. They rob these guys of what they own, triple the price, and sell it again. But the other people don't profit share in that. So it's a messy situation. As far as doing something about it, with how corrupt the government is, California, you do forget about it. With Gavin Newsom and these assholes running that state, I don't see that ever stopping. That's my opinion. I think those guys are California is run by bureaucrats, and very, very corrupt bureaucrats. So they're always going to chase the money and side with the people with the money. That's my opinion. Some people could disagree with it, but that's what I see.
Yeah, and I think that's important to always be able to state what it is that you see. Here's the fascinating part I find about you. By the way, I know this is about like halfway through the interview, but for some of my fans,
you can take all the time you want.
Bro. Dude, I love this. You have no idea how much I absolutely love just getting to talk about just whatever comes to mind. And this topic in particular to me is very important. But for some of you guys who are just joining in, this is my buddy from Hollywood Undead, Johnny 3 Tears. And I love it because I literally pick up the phone and we just start talking like if I'd known you for a very long time, especially because we're both from LA and there's that camaraderie that I feel like we share because
we don't run into many of our own kind very often.
We don't. So, we don't. And that's something to be said because I love this city. Like anyone who meets me understands that LA is my home. And I try my best to make people here feel at home, because I know this place like the back of my hand, and I want to make sure that no matter where they go, where they want to live, that they feel comfortable in that area and that they experience what the city has to offer. And this city has so much character to it. And especially because it's like you were saying, it's such a huge melting pot that you can walk down any block. And again, I feel like you can say this about many cities, but every city has their different highlights. And I think LA has always had this welcoming vibe. You know, obviously it's had its
Totally.
problems, but overall, I think in its history, you can see that people would just kind of come here. They'd create their own little hubs, but people can just kind of come and go. Everyone's just kind of from everywhere, and no one cared about that until recently. And it's strange. It's strange to see that unfolding, especially when I still live here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's interesting for me that you care a lot about that. And I'm wondering if that passion, you know, it seems to me like you're someone who really cares about bettering people's lives and about the issues, especially this issue in particular. Were you always like that? Like, is this something that you feel like you gained over time, or even as a teenager living here, did that matter
No,
to
I
you?
mean, dude, I saw it with my own family. So we lived in Atwater, Glassell Park area, and we had to move numerous times because of the same issues. I mean, those areas are unrecognizable now. So we were locals that could no longer live where we grew up.
Yeah.
So I experienced it firsthand. So probably it might not be something I would think about unless I experienced it. And now, as you know, you start to reflect and look at things more objectively, and you realize this isn't a personal problem, it's a social problem that's going on in the city at large. I found that my sympathies lie with a lot of these people that I don't think really anybody's vouching for them. I don't think anybody's going, hey, you know this family grew up in this, they're a second generation family from this neighborhood, and they can no longer even afford to keep their house because of all the development around them. And what bothers me is the people in these communities have no say what happens in their community, which is what the problem is. And like going back to what you said about LA, how everybody feels welcome
Yeah.
culturally,
No one cares
racially,
where you're from in LA. No one gives a shit.
exactly. And everybody's so used to being around such a mixed group of people that is what is so special about it. There's no neighborhood divides where it's like, yeah, granted, there's bad neighbors you probably shouldn't go into, but you can go experience any culture by throwing a rock, and following it. You're going to find somebody new and somebody else. And I think that experience for people is going to cease to exist over time because people who used to come to LA from all over the world for opportunity are going to start looking elsewhere because who the fuck's going to have $5,000 to pay in rent? Especially if
Yeah.
you're coming from another country to develop a new life, you have to make that transition a little easier. And LA is not going to be that place anymore. They're going to look elsewhere, and that to me is what made LA so special when I was growing up. And I think that's going to cease to exist. And you're going to have that big divide between the wealthy and the poor. And people are going to look elsewhere for those opportunities because they're no longer available in cities like Los Angeles or New York or Chicago. They're going to start. You see a lot of people going to the South now because the cost of living is so much
Yeah.
less. So they're going to benefit from the same thing. So, I mean, it's good for some people, but I guess everything's like that. A win for one group is always a loss for another one. No one can win all the time. So who knows? Maybe they're going to come down to Gulfport, fucking Mississippi, and make it the hub of the world. I don't know. Uh,
It can
I have,
happen, as history has taught us. It can definitely happen.
dude, yeah, LA was a fucking orange grove and some farming communities, and now it's like the entertainment hub of the world. If you told someone that 150 years ago, they'd tell you you're out of your fucking mind.
Oh yeah.
So that just goes to show you. I mean, I hope that LA stays LA. It'll always be LA to me. I'll always go to Dodger games, and I'll always go drive through my childhood neighborhood, even if I don't fucking recognize it anymore, because it has that special nostalgic place in my heart. But it also aches because I know it's never going to be the way it was. But I guess that's the same for everybody.
It's true. So then how would you compare then living in, because you said you live in Nashville now, right? Or at least you spend a lot of your time in
I spent a
Nashville.
lot of time here and in Oklahoma City.
Got
So
it. I'm wondering the issues that we were just talking about, that isn't one of the main reasons why you left, right? Or why you're spending more time over there, right? Is
yeah,
it
I mean, like I work in an industry that's kind of spreading now as we speak outside of music. So I kind of go where the industry takes me in
which is
that sense.
cannabis, right?
Yeah, we have some grows and stuff, and some dispensaries in Oklahoma City, and Nashville's going to go legal, so or Tennessee's going to go legal, so we're kind of preparing for that. So I work in those fields. California, and just in typical California fashion, we had a license in Baldwin Park, and we had a grow and a facility, and because the way their business operates, they made it impossible for us to function there. They charge $1 million for a license to grow weed, and then they
Wow.
tax you 60%. By the time you're done, you owe money at the end of every harvest. So we were like, dude, we can't function here anymore. So we left. We left California. The business left California.
Yeah.
And that's another one of California's faults, I guess. Tax laws and all this shit. They make it. There's so much red tape to do fucking anything there. But I still, like I said, I have a place in my heart. I love Manhattan Beach. I love Huntington Beach. I love going to the water down there and getting food and just checking everything out. LA has something about it that no other place in the world has. And I've traveled the world. That's what I do for work. And there's nothing like it. And I can attest to that 100%. And it's a shame. So I do hope that it rebounds, and I hope that things change, and or at least the changes are arrested and stopped, so that people from there and generational families can stay where they want to stay and live amongst their family members and won't get the boot. But who knows at this point, bro?
I hope so too, man. And what's interesting about what you just said is I feel like most people, at least in this country, like cannabis was almost synonymous to California culture. You know what I mean? Like I feel
Absolutely.
like people, I mean, even in especially in hip hop, like it was just known that California had some of the best cannabis in the world. And to know that the state, now that it's legal, has made it very difficult for people to kind of just come out of nowhere and be able to do it for themselves. It's pretty much has been established so that big companies can do it, but
Exactly,
nobody
dude.
else.
It all goes back to the money. They don't want the guys, the industry, the shoulders this industry was built on. The little man, the regular grower, the guy growing in his garage, risking his life or at least time in jail so that he could grow. Those are the guys who built that industry. But
Yeah.
but they can't afford. They price people out, dude. It's all done on purpose. They want the corporations running the cannabis industry in California, so they make it impossible for anyone but those corporations to be able to function. So I know a lot of people that when it passed in California who went legal, who tried to go legal, and found that they lost their ass. It was like impossible. So all of them went right back to the black market. The black
Yeah.
market still controls California. There's no
You
doubt
ever
about that.
you ever watch that Netflix documentary Murder Mountain?
Yeah, I
You
did,
watched
dude.
that? Yeah.
What a trip, right?
It
I mean,
talks
dude,
all about that, man. It's crazy.
it's funny, because the guys that I came up doing this with, a lot of these guys are, shady characters, they're gangbangers, stuff like that. We'll sit in a meeting with guys like that and then guys with $100 million in the bank who want to invest in it. So it's this motley crew, like the mixture of people involved in it. It's still controlled vastly by illegal markets. So you'll be in a meeting with guys that should not be in meetings with bankers, but there they are because they want in. So you have these Wall Street types and straight fucking street dudes talking business because one wants something from the other. And it's a bizarre thing, dude, because the rules aren't written yet. The federal legalization hasn't passed. I don't see it passing that soon. It will eventually.
Yeah.
Until then, it's always going to operate in a black market sense because you can't use banks and you can't do certain things. You can't cross this line or that line. So it's a fascinating world, dude. The marijuana industry is just at like this fork in the road, and I don't really know where it's going to go. No one really knows where it's going to
Yeah.
go.
I honestly,
But
I don't think anyone knows. I have a couple buddies who are getting into it, and they also told me that they tried doing it in LA and California, and it was just impossible. So they've
mhm.
moved over to Oklahoma, where apparently
Yeah,
the license is, I don't even know, like a couple grand compared
dude.
to like $1 million.
So we have 4 dispensaries called 46 Relief in Oklahoma City. And we got 2 grows out there. One of them's connected to one of our shops. I'm actually flying out there later this afternoon. Um, and when we started there, okay, so the license we bought in Baldwin Park was like 800 grand, and you have to give the city of Baldwin Park another 250 grand a year just to operate, right?
Yeah.
So right there, and that's before you even start growing, you're fucking in a huge hole. And then the restraint. So we didn't. This is a true story. We didn't put a fucking diaper changing thing in the bathroom. And the inspector came and said, "Hey, you need a diaper changing thing in here." And we're like, "But dude, the law says you have to be 21 to even be in here. So there's not going to be a baby here. Still, you got to follow the codes." So they made us put a fucking changing table in the bathroom and said we have to wait for the next inspection to start because of it. We had to wait a month just for
Oh,
them to make
dude.
sure the baby changing station was there. This whole time we're bleeding money. So they literally made it impossible. And so I had some boys in Oklahoma City that wanted to do it, and we brought our expertise, our because we grow. We said, let's team up. And you're exactly right. The licenses out there were $2,500
Wow. Dude, that's not
instead
even
of a
like that's like less than 5% of the
but
California cost.
dude, it's nothing compared.
Nothing.
Nothing. And the regulations were easy. You get, I mean, there's you still got to fucking follow code, building codes and stuff, but they don't make it impossible. So as long as you're not an idiot, you can do it. Unfortunately, what happened is so many people went out there at once that they oversaturated the market. There's a fucking dispensary on every corner. Um, which can be troublesome and stuff like that. But they'll all go away once they realize they don't know. You have to grow in order to make money because you're buying shit at 50% markups already to put in your store. Then you have to mark it up and pay your overhead. By the time you do it, you're probably breaking even. So you have to have your own product to really do well. But there's a lot of gunners out there from LA, like dudes that are big in the industry from California, operating discreetly in Oklahoma because they see the opportunity. So you're going to see more of that once Tennessee goes legal. You're going to see massive influx to Nashville, and then as time moves on, Florida, you get these different places. There's going to be hubs outside of California. What we did is we just took what we grew in California and put it in Oklahoma City. For to them, like that hydro shit's like fire. So they're like, "Yo, they'll buy this shit up because they're used to outdoor nasty shit." So it's interesting, man. But yeah, dude, I don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. It's actually very similar to the music industry. One day you could have a hit, and the next day or yesterday's news. So you have to stay on top of everything. And I see a lot of parallels because music's the same thing. You have a bunch of artists, a bunch of guys who just want to make fucking music. They've been making music. That's it. They don't want anything else but to be artists. You get a bunch of guys with a ton of money. You say, okay, well, I'll help you become an artist that sells music. You just have to give me 90% of what you earn. And at the time, that sounds pretty good because, oh shit, someone might actually hear my music. And then they start selling records and their singles doing good. They go, oh, dude, where's my share of this money? Oh, you don't get a share, dude. You signed this contract that gave it all to Universal or Interscope or one of these labels. And you have the same kind of racket in the music industry that you have in that industry, where a bunch of guys with a bunch of money who don't give a flying fuck about music or a flying fuck about the cannabis community taking it over with the almighty dollar. So it's not like
Yeah.
artists run labels, bankers run labels. It's not like cannabis growers run the cannabis industry, bankers run the cannabis industry. So there's a lot of parallels that I've seen. We've gone to war with our record labels just since we started. There's never been a dull moment, and kind of the same thing now with this world.
Yeah. You know what I'm curious about? You guys have been doing music for a very long time. There's so many things I'm curious about your career because it's incredibly fascinating. And to hear what you're saying in your experience, it's something I hear about a lot. And sometimes I'll hear the opposite, where where some artists through trial and error have found a way to compromise, where they're able to kind of fight for an equal share and they get it. But it's interesting to me because in all those experiences, what I gather is that you sort of have to fight for that compromise, and it's not like a given right off the bat. My question for you is, do you feel like you guys have been in this for over a decade? Have you guys gotten to a point where you guys are able to kind of get a compromise in the
So
middle?
we signed in 2004 to Interscope. So you're talking 16 years now, and we signed the typical major label deal. Now we're with BMG, who does a artist share deal where the record industry has changed vastly over that time as it transitioned from unit sales to streaming.
Yeah.
No one will sign those deals with major labels anymore because they don't have the power they used to. Streaming is completely independent of the label. So before, you kind of had to sell your soul to even get your record on a shelf in Best Buy or Sam's or Tower. Some of you probably don't remember that shit, but there was record stores at one point. And that was the only avenue to get your music out there. With the advent of the popularity of SoundCloud and Spotify and all these things, you can be an unsigned artist and get your music out there. So they lost a lot of that power. A lot of artists complain about streaming because the payout isn't what they think is fair. My defense of it is, you may not get paid what you think is fair, but you can put your music out to the world without any medium, without a via or a record label to
True.
say, so their function is much more important than the victims of it. Oh, I'm only getting X amount per stream. Okay, I get it. but you wouldn't be able to stream without some major label, period, before. No one would hear your shit.
That's true.
So there's more good to the streaming service than there is bad. I understand everybody always wants, artists have been getting ripped off since the fucking art was created, period. Plagiarism, whether it's copyright infringement or a label signing you. You know, like when we signed our deal, dude, we were starving. We didn't have any fucking money. I mean, we were dirt poor. All of us grew up without anything, you know. So the most money I'd ever had, I had managed to save up like $280 once, and I still remember the amount because it was the most money I'd ever had. All of a sudden, our record label comes in and says, "Hey, we'll give you 450 fucking grand to sign this." When you've been living off top ramen for a month, you're like, dude, I'll sign fucking anything. I haven't had a new pair of underwear in 2 years. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, you're that desperate. So we signed the deal. And yeah, we each got like 75K. So I went from having absolutely nothing. And to me, that was millions of dollars at that time. I was rich. And typically, like every other idiot, I went out and blew it on coke and girls and alcohol in 8 months.
Everyone goes through a phase like that. Everyone goes through a phase.
Yeah. That's the money you're supposed to blow. That's what they say in the industry. Blow your signing bonus so you feel what it's like to have some money, but then be smart after that. But I continue to blow it on coke and all those things for years. But that's me. So, I mean, they have something to offer that you're never going to get without it. So we got that money. And yeah, they've owned us ever since. They own our catalog. So like our first record and our second and third records are still owned by Universal Music Group. They collect, I think, 83% of the revenue.
Wow.
And keep it, even though we haven't worked with them in 7-8 years. That's just, we sold your soul. And so like, if you can do it without a label, I strongly suggest doing it without a label, which is what streaming services enable artists to be able to do. So it's a different world now. And I've gone from the young kid to kind of the veteran. So, you know, I've been in it for a long time. We've been in every kind of deal. And we've had our ups and our downs and stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of kids out there. Music, to me, is the saving grace of society. Without it, the world's already fucking crazy. If it wasn't for music, it'd be much, much fucking crazier.
Well, yeah.
So I always encourage kids, you know, people get discouraged because the business is complex and it's definitely dog eat dog, and it's not for everybody. But now young artists have an opportunity I never did. You can get your music out there on its own merits. If it's good, it's good. And you can get it out there and develop a following on its own merits, not whether someone else says it's good, or you need to work with this producer, or this isn't like this, you need to rewrite this hook, this lyric isn't okay. You can do it based on what you believe is good. And if your music is good, you can be successful without anybody else's control. And we never had that opportunity. So
you did what you had to do at the time. What I'm curious about is, let's say kids nowadays, I mean, labels are still signing deals and they're still doing all that to a lot of young kids. If they had an opportunity to either have a lawyer or maybe even negotiate a better split, would you actually maybe even using your story as an example, going back to your early days, if the deal was a little better, if you guys were able to kind of be able to do like a 50-50 split, would you still recommend against a deal at all costs, or would you say
because the labels still have capability. So if you're getting a 50-50 split, that's actually fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the label's going to shoulder a lot of the initial costs to make videos, to do things that are very tough for you to do. So if you can get a 50-50 split with a label, by all means, because they still have avenues you can't get. They could still call it, you know, you get a radio team with the label that's going to go to radio stations. You have publicists, you have people that are working for you. So there's definitely a line. You don't have to do it independently. My only point was you don't need to sign a deal now. But if you can get a favorable deal for somebody and have a label that's on your team, because everybody who works at labels, they're not all the devil. They're just a lot of them are. We're with BMG now, and we get 80%. We get the lion's share of the.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. So, but you have to earn it because BMG ain't going to sign you unless you do business already.
Yeah.
So a lot of people sign what's called artist development deals. They're going to dump some money in you, but they're going to get the lion's share of the profit. Is that completely unfair? I don't know, because you ain't going to be shit unless they sign you that artist development deal, because they'll give you the funding to get in with the right people, the right producers, the right studio. It's not black and white, dude. There's a lot of gray area.
It's not, and you're absolutely right. I personally, the way I see it, I think it's a case by case basis. I think what you're saying in your experience, because you're a very smart dude. I can totally tell based on the past like 30 minutes we've been talking. you're a veteran of this industry, someone who I'm hoping I can learn from in the future. I think
Oh,
what I'm gathering is basically just be smart and understand that there's all these choices in front of you, especially
yep.
nowadays where you can do it on your own if you have your own work ethic and you have that ability to do so. But if the opportunity arises where someone wants to invest in you, be smart about that. You know,
Yeah,
stand your ground.
and know who they are. You
Yeah.
gotta know, dude. There's these guys. They're wolves in sheep clothing a lot of the time. So they're gonna promise you a lot. They're gonna say they're gonna do this for you. You better fucking understand that these guys aren't your friends. 50 Cent said it best. These industry fucks ain't your friends. They know how to pretend. Um,
So
so
true.
I've gone out to dinner with these guys that they ask you how your kids are doing. How's your wife? I heard your grandma passed. I'm so sorry. The second you're not working with them anymore, you don't fucking exist. So there's some lessons to be learned, but I think it's like that in the whole world. In dude, the music industry, it's almost like an illegal business that operates legally. They do a lot of shit, a lot of stuff. Is pretty wild that takes place in it. And I mean, look at any artist that writes a song about a label. None of them are fucking positive.
I
Not one
know.
of them is saying, "Man, I fucking love my label." It's always a war. So I would say today you have so many more options than we had at the time. We took the one key to the gate we could get, while now, dude, the biggest burgeoning music scene is SoundCloud rap. These
Yeah.
guys, all these dudes just put their music on SoundCloud and blew up. They didn't sign with a label. None of these guys had to sign a deal. And these guys are making money hand over fist because they own their music. So,
Yeah. And if they're with a label, usually the label asked, it wasn't like
yeah,
they went looking for it.
I will say though, if you're a little white suburban kid and you see that, don't go get tattoos on your face and think you're going to be a rapper just because they did. All right,
I
because
fucking love it, dude.
I see that, dude. You see little white kids from places like fucking Porter Ranch tatting up their face, thinking they're rappers and they're thugs just because they saw Triple Red or Juice World or one of these guys do it. Everybody needs to relax with that whole thing because that's all they're doing now. When I was a kid, you had to learn to fucking play guitar before you did anything.
Yeah.
That was now it's like I don't even know how to play music. I just have to, tell some bullshit story and go, Gucci gang or whatever they do. So there's definitely limits to that world. But, if you make good music and you believe in your music and it is good, it actually is good, you don't need a label. But like you said, if you can get a good 50-50 deal and someone who really believes in you and wants to launch your career and is actually your friend and actually has your back, then by all means sign the deal. But make sure you do your research. And like I said, a lot of these guys are as fake as, most of the tits in California, bro.
Dude, you're speaking to the choir here. You guys have a brand new album coming out in February 2020. Like, why don't you tell me a little bit about what that's going to be about? Because I know that you guys are approaching it a little bit differently. And like I was saying, you have so much experience. I'm curious what the vibe is towards this album and like what you want your fans to get out of it.
Okay. Well, no, and I appreciate everything you said, by the way, dude. That was very nice of you. And I definitely try and do my best to help, young artists. And, I feel I don't want people to end up in the same position as I did. So I always try and, make it easier. But with the new record, we call it's New Empire. It's a double album. One comes out in February, and I think the other one's going to come out in May. Our mission, I guess you could call it that, was usually we build our records off the record that preceded it. So this is our sixth album, and you have this structure of all these other records that came before, and you're kind of like building on all of those. And we kind of our intention. We went to the studio. We had a production meeting and said, look, let's pretend we never wrote a fucking record before. Let's wipe it all away because a lot of the times, we already wrote a song with that progression. We did this before. We haven't done this before. We said, look, what would we do if we've never recorded an album prior to this moment? And we just let it go. So we kind of scraped away the whole foundation that we had. And this is kind of Hollywood Undead, like reimagined, like what would we do now if we just got signed? And if this was our first record, and that's what we really went for, to get a fresh outlook, because it's easy over time to get into rhythms. Like when you're writing songs, there's patterns to it, and you start following a pattern because you think something's successful. Okay, I'm going to use that same pattern. And you might get a hit, but you lose the integrity of the song. You lose the honesty in the music. So that was really how we went about writing the two volumes. was let's pretend we've never done this before.
I love that, man. And I love that you guys have the opportunity to approach your music in a very fresh way, because I think every artist needs that from time to time, to be able to just, if I hadn't done this before, what would I do? It's so freeing. I feel
Exactly.
like it's such a freeing thing to do, and you can create some very genuine moments. And I'm really excited for you guys, man. I can't wait to hear the new stuff. And hopefully, are you guys coming to LA anytime soon?
Oh, dude, in spring. We'll be there in spring. So hit me up and we'll hang out.